what's going on? China's coming down. ISIS is kicking butt. Putin now joined forces with Assad. So the real big question is, what do you do? And for those of you, and we've all been here, ¿qué pasa? What do we do now? What's going to happen? Are we, I was listening to Carl Icahn on CNBC this morning. They're asking me if we're in a bear market. He goes, what's a bear market? So here's Icahn, one of the most powerful investors in the world, and CNBC, what they call bubble vision. They're good guys, but they're journalists. They go, well, the bear market is this, and they sling all this jargon around, and it basically confuses people. Then we have David Stockman, who was Reagan's budget director and all this, and he said, direct quote to CNBC, he says, you better muzzle that guy Jim Cramer, because it's bad advice. So the question is, it's ¿qué pasa? Who do we listen to? What do we do at this time in the economy? And if I give you a plug, this is the time of the economy that Rich Dad was created for, because the old stuff is not working. I wrote a book called Rich Dad's Prophecy, which came out in 2002, but I started writing it in 98, 97 at the height of the boom. And I said, this baby is coming down in 2016. So in Rich Dad's Prophecy, which published 2002, you can check it out. It's recorded. I said that the stock market was going to come down. It was going to be the biggest crash in the history of the world. It's going to be a perfect storm. All these things are colliding. And as you may know, 2016 is next year. But I also said there would have been a preliminary crash that would come before the biggest crash in history. And that crash came exactly in 2007. In November, the Dow reversed from 14,000, and then it really went into a bear market around December of 2007. And then, as we know, companies like Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns and Merrill Lynch and all the experts got wiped out. So here we are today, it's 2015, and now China's kind of backing up. Caterpillar just announced 5,000 layoffs and another 10 to 15,000 layoffs next year. This is just one company. So if you're one of these guys who, drank the Kool-Aid of go to school and get a safe, secure job, well, Caterpillar was a very safe, secure job. And here we have Carly Fiorina. She's a good, smart woman, but she is an employee. And, she laid off 30,000 people when she was at HP. And she wants to be president. Do you know what I mean? So, again, it's for everybody out there who's kind of wondering what's happening. And this is the Rich Dad Radio Show. It's just for you. If you want to know what to do next, stay tuned. Any comments, Kim?
Well, I'm looking forward to talking with our guest, Garrett, because we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about business owners. If you own a business, you definitely want to stay tuned to this show.
If you're an employee, you should listen too, because you may lose your job quickly.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about if you lose your job, that there may be an opportunity to be a business owner. But I just want to say this too, because one thing about entrepreneurship, and one of the things we love about entrepreneurship is that we are in control. We control our income. We control. And when you talk about the stock market, so you're talking about Carl Icahn. Carl Icahn gave some advice to the average investor. And he said, if you cannot afford to lose 30 or 40% of what you've got invested
in your 401k,
get out and put it in cash.
Right.
So this is the time, I think, for entrepreneurship more than ever.
Well, it's really a time to not be a nowhere man. You've got to make a decision which way you're going to go. And our guest today is Garrett Gunderson. He's an entrepreneur, founder, and chief wealth architect of Wealth Factory. He's the author of Killing the Sacred Cows, one of my favorite titles, Overcoming Financial Myths That Destroying Your Prosperity, which was published in 2008, and also The Jackrabbit Factor, Portal to Genius in 2010. His website is wealthfactory.com. Great title. So, Garrett, tell me how you're a very young guy, extremely successful. How did you get into this ridiculous business of talking to people about money?
Well, I started my first business when I was 15 years old. I grew up in a small coal mining town called Price, Utah. And so much like your, poor dad, my family really was that kind of a family. All coal miners, my grandfathers, my great-grandfathers.
Good, hardworking people.
Loved them, but didn't have a relationship with money. It was very scarcity related, Some of them actually buried money in the backyard. Some of them had money in Folgers coffee cans in their cellars. I mean, really didn't understand investing, didn't talk about it. But when I started my first business, I won the Young Entrepreneur of the Year award, and it came with $5,000. So,
what was your first business?
Really innovative. Get ready. Garrett Gunderson's Car Care. I detailed cars.
Oh, great.
I detailed cars.
That's not entrepreneurship. That's owning a job.
But you got to. What's awesome? By the time I was 16, I had 3 employees, and I stopped washing the cars.
There you go.
Yep.
It doesn't make any. This is the whole theme of the show. It really doesn't make a difference what you do. Just do something today.
Yeah, I started on the S side, right? The self-employed. I had a job, and then I read the quadrant. I'd start thinking, okay, I'm not really a business owner. I'm owned by my business. And that's how I kind of became a speaker, is because I gave a 1-hour presentation and won $5,000 from that presentation about my business.
It's more than I make today.
And I guess unlike other kids, I wanted to invest the money. And that's where I kind of got started in finance.
But also, we were talking before Kim on the program that your first book you read was Millionaire Next Door, right?
First financial book.
Very good book, yeah. So what did you think of that? Because you're a little town, Millionaire Next Door. It sounds logical.
Yeah, I'm lucky to still be married based upon that philosophy, because if my wife ordered wine with dinner, I'd be like, well, if we compound that interest, look at what. So everything was about what we could reduce.
And you are still married today.
Right. It was all about what we could eliminate. It was all about saving.
It was about scarcity.
It was scarcity. We were pinching pennies so hard that we had blisters on our fingers, and we fought about it. So rather than taking our mental energy towards production and value creation, we took our mental energy of what we could eliminate. We lived in a freaking apartment, even though I had 14 rental properties I owned. And
that's smart,
Starting out, that's not a bad. That's a bad strategy.
Yeah, that's not bad. The point here, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this show is that we're in a very precarious time. If I am correct, the next 20 years are going to be catastrophic for most people. And that's why we have the Rich Dad program. We're not here to scare you. We're here to motivate you to do something. Because, we're talking to Garrett earlier, is that most people have been lulled into this false sense of security. Everybody say, well, what's your financial planner say? What's your financial planner say? And
you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
Buy it while the market's down. It's on sale. Blah, blah, blah.
And before we go on, we're going to say some pretty horrible things. So I want you to listen up. We don't mean to be horrible. It's just we want you to pay attention. You got to know who you're listening to. Just as Garrett read Millionaire Next Door, and he says, this doesn't fit me. But It fits most people.
It does.
You see, Millionaire Next Door, even though they got creamed after 96. But anyway, they got creamed because it was bad advice for people like us here.
Well, if I didn't read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, who knows would I still be following that
You'd
kind
still
of
be
faulty
saving
advice,
money,
right? And how much would that have cost me in being productive and investing and, money?
It's really a great time. Just move forward. But if you're sitting there wondering who you're listening to and who advice and all this stuff, that's a first step. So we're going to trash a few people here. Not really trash, but make definitions. For example, Susie Orman has great advice for poor people. That's fabulous advice.
Well, if you do not want to get financially educated, she says, cut up your credit cards. Well, if you don't want to get financially educated, that's good advice.
That's great advice, but it also means you can't control your spending emotions.
She's really good, and so is Dave Ramsey at taking a train wreck and putting them on track.
Let me be clear. Okay, Susie Orman is perfect for poor people.
Yep.
And poor people, it's not how much money you make. It's can you control your spending, really?
Right. It's mindset.
If you're just compulsive, spend, no matter how much money you make. Susie Orman is the best person. I love it when she scolds people, because Kim scolds me all the time because I like to shop. I like to spend money.
I called him Imelda Marcos.
Yeah, because I like to shop, have a good time. So Susie Orman is perfect for those with poor emotional control habits. You can't control yourself. And then you have Dave Ramsey, who is perfect for the middle class. He is absolutely, he says, live debt free. Well, that's really great advice if you, again, don't want to be rich. And then there's advice for the rich, and that's Rich Dad, and that's why we hang out with Donald Trump and all this, and that's why that's why Millionaire Next Door did not resonate for you. It didn't speak to your soul, did it?
Exactly. Did not.
And that's the theme of the show right now. You better make a decision right now. You're going to be poor, then listen to Susie Orman. Cut up your credit cards, do all that stuff. You want to be middle class? I tell you, Dave Ramsey's advice of live debt-free is fantastic. Just keep your job, get out of debt, save a few bucks, invest for the long term in the stock market, and you'll be possibly okay. But if you want to be rich, that's the Rich Dad Radio Show. So once again, this is the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money. Today, our special guest is Garrett Gunderson. He's the entrepreneur, founder, and chief wealth architect of Wealth Factory. He's the author of Killing Sacred Cows, Overcoming the Financial Myths. And I think that's really the theme, is because most of the stuff put out by these Bubble Vision, CNBC, and the financial planners are myths. Is that correct?
Absolutely. The number one myth that they perpetuate is that there's scarcity, right? That it's all fear.
Well, it's that if you just follow the magic formula.
Right. I love how you open up talking about CNBC, where they talk about these really complicated things, and then they go to the commercials of people sitting on a beach throwing rocks and drinking beer like it's really easy.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's this kind of mismatch between what's being talked about. And you mentioned Jim Cramer. I mean, we've seen how predatory his advice is and how bad it is for people.
What does predatory mean?
Well, he's telling people to do something like put money into a mutual fund. Well, he's investing in dark pools, and they're doing flash trading where they're sucking the money off the top of it. Well, you're just kind of sitting there not knowing what's happening. So,
how many times have you talked to the average educated person? They say, "Yeah, I have a 401k. I'm in mutual funds." Right.
Right. That's
possibly the worst, most stupid advice today. Now, it was great advice 20 years ago. Well, but today it's horrible advice.
And here's part of the reason it's so bad is, are taxes going up or down? Everyone knows taxes are going up. Why would you defer taxes? Because if taxes go up, now you've just hurt yourself. You have no control of your money.
But the point is, the average person has no idea. They just checked out of this radio
They're so
show.
afraid of the IRS.
We just lost 15,000 nowhere men. They go, "What's he talking about? You got to pay taxes." You know what I mean? Because the myth is you have to pay tax. And it's really not the myth that you have to pay tax. The real thing that goes on inside of Chicken Littles out there, they go, I don't want to be audited.
Yep.
I don't want to be audited. I don't want the IRS.
Because they have bad financial planners or bad tax strategists.
They put their hens in their ears, la, 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 don't tell me about taxes.
Well, and
that's going to make you poor and middle class.
Yeah, I don't like when an accountant says they're conservative, because I translate it as antiquated, lazy, or doesn't know.
Well, they don't know.
Yeah.
Where is this economy going? What's going to happen now? I did all the right things. I got a job. I have a 401k. It's not performing. My house hasn't really gone up in value. I've lost money all this time. And now I hear these rumors about China and ISIS and Syria and Assad and Putin and all this stuff. And I hear the stock market might be in a bear market. Now, that would cause people to take a breath, So let's say I'm 50 years old right now. I have $1 million or $2 million in the stock market. And the question is, what happens if it crashes? So these are legitimate questions. And so our guest today is Garrett Gunderson. He's entrepreneur, founder, and chief wealth architect of The Wealth Factories, author of Killing Sacred Cows. And what we're doing today is defining who you take financial advice from. Like we said, there's Susie Orman. Her advice is great for poor people.
Right.
I'm not saying how much money you make. You see, if you can't control your spending, if your favorite pastime, the only exercise you get is walking through a mall or surfing the web, Susie Orman is your financial advisor. Cut up your credit card, get control of your spending impulses. And I don't need Susie Orman because I have my wife, Kim. Right, Kim?
That's correct. You do like to shop. I'm not the shopper of the family. But we were also talking about Dave Ramsey. And Dave Ramsey's message is, get out of bad debt. Get out of debt.
No. It's just live debt-free.
All debt is bad in his world.
Debt. Okay.
Yeah.
And his advice is fabulous for middle-class people.
Yes, but
the train wrecks, he'll get them on track at least.
Yeah. Right, and that's good advice for those people. We met with him one time, and he said something very insightful, and he said the difference between his advice and our advice is at Rich Dad, we look at everything as entrepreneurs. We look at every investment as a business. We look at everything we do as entrepreneurs. It's a very different mindset.
Yep.
Right. And so our guest today is Garrett Gunderson, and really started, when as a young guy, you read Millionaire Next Door, and that tells you to be frugal and the scarcity and save money, which is horrible advice for me, but great advice for most people, right?
Yeah, and the equation that they kind of give you is that if you want more wealth, they tell you have to do one of three things. Put more money in, take more risk, and by the way, if you increase your risk, you increase your chance of loss. My best investments had the lowest risk I had and the highest return. And then the third thing is they tell you just wait longer, right? That's not the equation of the wealthy, but it's the equation of the poor. Money times rate times time. That's what they want you to believe.
So when you read Millionaire Next Door, how old were you?
I was a teenager at the time.
What happened?
I was in high school.
And what happened to your gut, your brain, your soul, and all that? Did you say, oh, this is great advice. I love it.
Well, No, but I was kind of like that small town kid going, I want to make it big. I want to do something. And it was the first piece of advice that I really had gotten. So I did it reluctantly, and it was frustrating because it was all about what I could save and cut out.
Well,
and
it contracts you as a being. It makes you less than instead of being more than. Well, it does me.
It kills my spirit.
It does for me. Yes.
See, that's our point.
Yes.
The first step is you got to decide who you are. And then when you decide who you are, then you decide whose financial advice you want to follow. Like I said, I have my friend makes a lot of money, but his wife spends more. Mm-hmm. So her guru should be Susie Orman.
Yeah.
She makes, she and her husband make about $4 million a year, but she spends $19 million a year. You know what I mean? She can't help spending. She's addicted to spending.
So Robert.
So Susie's advice is great because if you can't control that, you'll never be rich, right?
Absolutely.
So you have people that spend more than they make. You have people that want to contract and cut coupons and all of that stuff. How do you decide who you are?
It's a little bit tough because when I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I went to my grandfather, and he was the closest thing I knew to an entrepreneur because he owned a TV repair shop, even though he's a coal miner. He did that on the side, and he was in a band. He looked at it like, well, when are you going to get a real job, right? And that never felt good, like to think
that's
real
the point.
Job. Yeah.
That's the point, you see.
So your family and friends.
Yeah, well, if you're nowhere, man, you're kind of looking for what resonates inside your body, mind, and spirit and soul, right? And then you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and you thought it was like the Bible coming to you or something.
I started we started having parties where I'd bring like 10 people. We'd play cash flow during parties on Friday nights.
Yeah.
Like I was like, this is it. I feel alive. It makes sense. It's a philosophy. And if you don't have a clear philosophy, someone else is going to sell you theirs.
And that's the first step.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
The message of the show for all of you out there who wonder what's going to happen with China, ISIS, Putin, and all this stuff, the question you have to ask yourself, do I want to be poor? Because if you're poor, nothing's really going to affect you. You look at a cockroach, they can be a thermonuclear device, and the cockroach will survive. You can eat scraps. You'll be fine. Or if you want to be middle class, right now, if you're uncertain with the China economy and the world and the printing money and all this stuff, then get out of debt. Sit like a middle class, cling to your job, get a job like McDonald's, work extra hard, or you can decide to be rich. Those are the first three choices you're going to make: poor, middle class, or rich.
Yeah. Well, and look, the middle class is playing a game I called easy hard. It's easy to choose middle class right now, but when these collapses happen, it's going to be increasingly harder to make it.
So you're predicting a crash.
Well, how can we not have an issue with this amount of money that's being printed and no value creation to back it up?
And that's why I started, the first part of this program. You look at Caterpillar. What does that mean? Most people you and I will never drive a D9 tractor around town. We buy Toyotas. But what does it mean that Caterpillar just announces 5,000 people losing their job in 2015?
It's an indicator.
Yeah, and 10 to 15,000 in 2016. And I'll plug it once more. Rich Dad's prophecy said the biggest crash was coming in 2016. So if you're middle class right now and you just lost your job at Caterpillar, what are you going to do?
Life gets hard. You got to make a choice.
Yeah, that's what this program is for. Some people, well, I have job security. Dream on, man. That's a real middle class choice, right? That's what we're saying.
Right. And it was harder for me to make the choice to be an entrepreneur, harder in the moment, but became easier every day that I've made that choice because I have more resources, opportunities, and I'm not subject to the economy as my entire life.
That's what we're saying. Does it speak to your soul? That's not that it's easy. Let me get one more thing why people are nowhere, man. This is the whole point. They're so afraid of making a mistake. And that's what you learn in school.
And you will make mistakes.
What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong? You're going to cover my butt?
I'm going to lose money. I'm going to look humiliated, be humiliated. My family's going to do this and this.
My family says you should never have done that.
Yeah, you're going to make mistakes, but what you learn from it.
That's what makes you nowhere, man.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So you made the choice. There was a choice to be poor, to be middle class, or to be rich. You made the choice, I want to be rich.
Right.
What did you do? How did you start? When you made the decision, then what do you do?
So first of all, when I made the decision, I said no to work for Anderson. Hey, look at the jobs I was offered. Anderson, they don't even exist anymore. Strong Investments.
Arthur Anderson?
Yep.
They're
gone.
Accounting firm?
That was my first place I was offered a job. The second place was Merrill Lynch. The third place was Strong Investments. They don't even exist anymore, and they were the number 2 fund family at the time. So what I did was I made a choice to be in business, and I chose to be in the world of personal finance.
So you said no to all those offers.
I said no, and it was depressing. I was scared. I was scared.
Yeah.
I had my family was like...
You're going into the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen.
But I got to tell you, for 6 months into that business, I got a check bigger than I would have made the entire year at Anderson from one client.
Yep.
Once again, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Good news and bad news about money. Our guest today is Garrett Gunderson. He's an entrepreneur, founder, and chief wealth architect of the Wealth Factory. We're talking about right now with the economy in turmoil. And that's probably, I agree with you. I think we're coming down. This morning, Icon said, if you can't afford a 30 to 40% hit in your stock portfolio, it means you're over 50 and you don't have time to recover. And let's say you have $1 million in there, you can't afford to lose $400,000. You should go back to cash. But that's good advice for average middle-class people.
Yes.
It's not a good advice for rich people. Just understand. And so this whole program we've been covering, Susie Orman is great for poor people. She's fabulous. I like her advice. Dave Ramsey, live debt-free, perfect for middle class. Included in there are David Bach and Rick Edelman and Tony Robbins. Their advice is fabulous for middle-class people. Cut back, go into hiding, crawl into the shell, and pull in the the thermonuclear, what do you call it, the fallout shelter door. But if you want to be rich, you look at Rich Dad, I like to be rich, and I think it hits you in the gut. So how did it feel when you made the decision? I don't want to be following Millionaire Next Door.
Well, at first it felt good, and then it got a little bit tough when I decided I was going to embrace being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, you have to cross the line.
Yeah, and I was that's the most depressed I've ever been in my life.
Right.
1999.
Because?
I was a little bit nervous. I had very little support, but I
money.
chose to do it anyway.
You had no income.
And I actually was doing okay financially because I'd already been in financial services, but unfortunately I have to make a damaging admission here. I was peddling mutual funds in 1998. I've repented. I've done everything I can to make up for that.
I'm glad the Pope was just here. I'll ask him for
I need a blessing for that. Okay. But I didn't want to do it that way because I saw quickly what crap that was. And in 2000, when the market started to go down, I went to every single one of my clients between March and May, and I said, you got to get your money out of the market completely. They said, why? I said, because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm handing it to someone else I've never met. I've never been in a single boardroom.
You said, I don't know what I'm doing?
I said, one of the hardest comments of my life.
Yeah.
And I said, I've never been in a single boardroom of any one of the stocks that are being held. I got paid a commission up front for putting that money in there.
And what percentage of financial advisors do the same thing?
0, because they defend their bad choices.
I mean, do the same thing in terms of turning it over to people they don't know and never being in the
everybody
boardrooms.
does that, but nobody actually confronts the reality.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at my clients at that time, I'm 19, 20 years old, so it's mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, it's all my friends' parents. I didn't want to go to family reunions and say, you're in it for the long haul, or dollar cost average. Who the hell wants to be average? I don't want to tell the dollar cost average. None of that made sense. And you know what? I said, okay, what can I do instead? And that's when I started to discover there's so many things that the financial world neglects because there's no commission tied to it. Like if you improve your credit score, you get access to money. You shave off the interest rates that you pay. You improve your insurance costs. If you get proactive with your taxes, there's so much money for business owners to put in their bottom line right now by saving on tax or by eliminating fees in their investments.
I understand that.
All that stuff.
But they're not going to do that as long as they're afraid of making a mistake.
Right. And that's
what I'm talking to.
And that's been my crusade, is to get a million entrepreneurs to economic independence so that they can swing for the fences in their business, not be reliant upon the stock market, have the ability to be rich and do something that they actually care about, because you could have retired years ago, but you have a mission to create life,
we did
literacy.
Retire years ago.
Right, but you're still here on the radio. You're still teaching people.
Because I'm talking to nowhere men out there. The guys who think their jobs are secure.
Not because you needed the money, but because you had a mission and a purpose beyond that.
Yeah, and this is our time. This is our time. I think for the first time, it's 2015, like I said in my book, Rich Dad's Prophecy. I wrote about my latest book, Second Chance. I said, this is your second chance. But it starts with you making a decision. Are you going to be poor, middle class, or rich? China's crashing. Stock markets are crashing. Putin, has an air base in Syria, and he wants us to join him. And the Saudis want us to attack Putin. We're cruising for war. Japan is now making overtures towards China. And that's what happens, when the economy gets really shaky. Countries go to war just to distract the population. That's why Adolf Hitler came to power back in 1933 was, the German people were so fed up with being poor. And he says, let's go kill everybody. And they're, yeah, let's do that. So they went off and they killed people. So we're on the verge of war. We're on the verge of economic meltdown. Christine Lagarde, head of the IMF, she says this is very spooky right now. Growth has stopped. And if you notice, most of our guests, you've been listening to our program for the last 3 or 4 years, our guests have been saying the same thing for a long time. Bert Doman, Chris Martenson, and Richard Duncan. We're in a very precarious position. So this thing about what are you going to do, the first decision is who you're going to listen to. But who you listen to depends upon who you are. That's really the thing. So your financial advice depends upon you. For example, Susie Orman is perfect for people who are poor. And what I mean by poor is you make $1, you spend 10. You're going to be a poor person no matter how much money you make. Listen to her. She's where you start because you can't come to where Rich Dad is if you don't change that habit. And if you're a person who really does not like risk, you want to play it safe and secure, then guys like Dave Ramsey are perfect. Live debt-free, pay off your house because when the thermonuclear device hit, at least your house will be paid off. It'll be destroyed.
Until they tell you to put it in a mutual fund.
Right.
Then you got to get a little scoop there.
And then the third part, you have Rich Dad. And Rich Dad, we hang out with Trump and all that. I know he's not popular with my Mexican friends or my military guys, but he's a rich guy. So the thing here is this. You got to decide who you're going to listen to, especially at this time. But who you listen to depends upon who you are. And so our guest today is Garrett Gunderson. And I love his story. He says he read The Millionaire Next Door as a young person, and it hurt to read the book, but he tried it. Then he read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it made more sense. Any comments, Kim?
Yeah, well, I like this idea that, we talk about if you have money to invest and you don't know where to put it, don't tell anybody you got it because they'll find a place to put it, right?
Great advice,
same with philosophy. And you said it earlier, Garrett. You said if you don't have a philosophy, a lot of people will give you their philosophy. So number one is you got to find that mindset of I want to be rich, if that is what you want, if you want to be rich, and find the information, find the mentors, find the advisors that align to that philosophy. I think that's step number one.
And the great thing I love about Garrett is he came from the financial services industry, and you saw the light again there too.
Right.
You're putting people in mutual funds and 401ks. And, our Rich Dad advisor, Andy Tanner, has a book called 401 Chaos, and then is how to make cash flow from stocks and all this. You don't have to be a loser in the 401k stock, right? Is that correct?
Absolutely. I created a thing called the 401k hoax. I think 401ks are one of the worst programs ever invented.
It was only to make Wall Street rich.
Right, because in the old days when someone robbed you, they showed up to the bank or they showed up to the train on a horse and you knew you're robbed. Now when you enter a 401k, they just automatically take out the fees whether you make money or not.
Right. What kills your fees?
Right. And
let me ask you this question, okay? What do you think of Susie Orman? Her advice is good advice, right? If you can't control your emotions and spend.
Yeah, people that spend more than they make have to listen to her.
Yeah. And when she says, I want a puppy, Susie, and she goes, denied, I just crack up. I said, right. Great advice, Susie.
Now, and then Saturday Night Live did a skit on Susie Orman that was pretty hilarious. It was someone worth $20 million calling in because they wanted to travel to Europe. And she said, no, it's cheaper to go to the Keys. Don't spend any money. So that's an example of someone who's rich taking advice from the wrong person, and they make a parody out of it because the hard work with the wrong philosophy equals bankruptcy. Hard work with the wrong philosophy equals financial devastation. And your philosophy around money is so critical because it's the mindset that matters right there at the base.
So what do you think about when Dave Ramsey says live debt-free?
I think that's good advice for most of the middle class.
Yeah, when Kim and I first started off, not first started off, but we lived in a small house. We paid $100,000 for it, but we were buying apartment houses at the same time. Yep. You did the same thing,
I bought 14 rental properties and still lived in a rental.
And it was interesting because a lot of our friends who were becoming successful in business, they were
buying houses.
The big houses, buying the fancy cars. And they're like, how come you're living in this little house? Da, da, da. And we're like, just wait.
Right. They didn't ever become economically independent.
And eventually we bought the big house, but only when our investments covered the cash flow, paid for it.
Yeah, so we had apartment houses, and people said, well, not that we're poor. It was a cute little house. We had room service from Hilton Hotel, and it was part of the Hilton properties. But our monthly payments were $310 a month, and rent in the area was $800. So our monthly mortgage payment was less than our rent payment, but we weren't, buying new clothes and all that. We were buying apartment houses, right, Kim?
We were, and that made all the difference.
So Dave Ramsey's advice is great, but if you want to be rich, you still have to start investing, right?
Yeah, it'll be almost impossible to break out of scarcity with that advice, though, because it is
people
on the scarcity side.
But understand this whole program here is this: you got to be true to your guts. If you're a frickin' coward and you don't want to lose money, don't want to make mistakes, Dave Ramsey's live debt free. Fantastic.
Best in the business.
I mean, so most of the middle class, the middle class is huge but shrinking, definitely shrinking. Most of the information that is on all these TV sets are geared towards the middle class. So you now to make a decision.
It's geared for people who don't know what to do.
Well, yes, and that's a lot of the middle class, and a lot. Now I'm middle class, and I'm like, yeah, I really want to get onto the other side. I really want to make that effort, put in the time. I got to change my mindset, my philosophy. I've made that decision. What do I do now?
You got to invest in yourself first.
What do you mean by that?
Well, no, the whole theme here, again, please hear me. You got to make a decision. You want to be poor, middle class, or rich. You see, following billionaire advice is not going to get you to be a billionaire, is it?
Nope.
No. And that's this whole thing here, but you've got to know in your gut, Kim. That's what we're saying.
I understand. So let's say now I've got that. I made the decision. I've made that choice. I'm like, yes, that's in my gut. I'm going to get aligned to this type of philosophy. I'm going to find people. What do I do? Where do I go?
This is why I love what Garrett's been saying. He say wonderful things about me, so I appreciate it. But anyway, what you have is a team of advisors, right?
Right.
You don't have financial planners.
No, we do not. We built what's called an accredited network where we go through and we interview these professionals to say this is the most unique insider advantage we could have is to have an amazing team.
So do we do the same thing?
We do. And it's not easy seeking out these advisors because there's a lot of frogs out there you got to kiss.
It takes a lot of time to find an advisor because most advisors aren't advisors, they're salespeople. Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki of the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Garrett Gunderson, and he's an entrepreneur, founder, and chief wealth architect of the Wealth Factory. Very successful young man. He's author of the book Killing Sacred Cows, Overcoming Financial Myths That Are Destroying Your Prosperity. See, the whole thing is most people are so afraid of making a mistake, right?
Yeah, they're worried about what someone's going to say, what someone's going to think, or what that says about them. But no one succeeds on the rich side without making mistakes.
So that's where they're nowhere men. They take all this advice and they don't know where this stuff's coming from. They just stay there. They stay put. Yeah, and they don't know where the advice is coming from. The point here is this, we are Rich Dad advisors. We don't sell investments. We sell financial education, but we also give as much as possible. But the point I want to make here is this. The reason Donald Trump and I write books together, and I don't write books with David Bach, is because we're multimillionaires and we're entrepreneurs. We're not salespeople. They're salespeople, right?
Right. It's like you would say, risk isn't in the investment, it's in the investor.
Right.
We're wanting to make better investors so you can make intelligent choices and live a better life.
So did you make mistakes in your process?
I did.
You learn a lot, don't you?
Yeah.
What's a big mistake you made? Biggest. I
had a lot of real estate at one time, and I thought I had the Midas touch, even though you have the book, The Midas Touch. I got a little bit over leveraged on a few pieces of real estate because I had done so well for so long. And then the partners I chose, when they declared bankruptcy, I was left holding the bag on the real estate. Right. So I had to add a lot of time, and it took me away from my business. So that was probably my business mistake.
Did you ever take a real estate course?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I learned how to auction real estate. I learned how to lease option.
I don't mean how you structure a financial deal.
No, but I went and got educated by people that were intelligent in real estate.
Mentors.
That had made money in real estate.
Yeah, be careful.
I paid money for.
That's the point here is this. I'm always taking real estate courses. But real estate is about debt and taxes. So when people say, how do you not pay taxes? Well, I invest in real estate. But that's risky. That's what they say.
Because they're uneducated.
Well, and it is risky if you've never taken a class. So
absolutely.
You got to be careful what you're selling. Like I said, Tony Robbins, our friend and all this, I don't know why he's selling what he's selling because he doesn't really go into financial services. But I think he is now, isn't he?
Well, his son's part of a financial firm.
So his people
that could be part of the
they're recommending. Yeah. I think that's a key point too. Is when you're reading something and they're directing you to a fund or they're directing you to a certain brokerage house. It's like all my red flags go up at that point. Right. I just want somebody who's doing what I want to be doing and learn from them.
And that's not bad. Look, everybody has something to sell. You have something to sell. I have something to sell, and all this. We're just saying you better make a decision. You're poor middle class. That's this program today because this baby's coming down. And if you don't know what to do, it's best to go into hiding, right?
Sitting around is going to be pretty painful.
Yeah, but it's
no
best
choice is going to be very painful.
It really is good to cut back if you don't. Like that's what's his name said today. Carl Icahn.
Yes.
He says if you can't afford to lose 40% of your portfolio,
he said get everything and put it in cash.
Put it in cash, but cash is safer. But it's not really safe, but it's better than losing 40%.
And what he said is, he knows how to make money up and down. He knows how to use all these different vehicles in the stock market. The average person doesn't.
Right, because of his intelligence.
They're going to get
because
killed.
of what he knows.
Well,
right. I call it his investor DNA.
Yeah.
But he's also an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You see?
Absolutely.
And so, lesson number one: you better look for your advisors, and they better not be trying to sell you something. They really be here. They really know what they're talking about. Like Tom Wheelwright is our tax guy. If you read Tom's book, Tax-Free Wealth, and then ask your tax advisor to read it, and your tax advisor doesn't like it, get a new advisor. Get a new partner in the whole thing. First of all, we focus on education. This last week we had another course.
We had a two-day course.
All our advisors get together and we study. If your friends don't want to study. But there's something that you did I thought was interesting as a young man. You got friends together to play the game cash flow, right? Didn't that tell you a lot about the behavior of the people that came to play the game?
Oh, there's some that I still do business with and spend a lot of time with, and there's others that I just don't spend time with anymore.
Because you see their behavior come out.
Oh, you get to see.
You see their philosophy come out.
So, the way you'll learn something is by doing something. And then when somebody comes in to play the cash flow game and they're afraid of making a mistake, you probably got somebody who's best being poor or middle class.
Well, actually, when we played the game, we took the group that I enjoyed playing it with that had the best insight, and we formed an investment company together and actually started doing real estate.
Good.
And some of them were really good at it, so we did.
Well, the whole thing here is with business. You're going to kiss a lot of. It's like marriage.
Yep.
You get married, you find out you married the wrong person, but that's business. That's life. And most people know we're men. You don't want to do that, so you hang on to the old wife or old husband just because it's better than make another mistake. And we're now in the most popular part of our program. It's called Ask Robert, and it's where you get to ask me your questions. And Garrett Gunderson has so generously, agreed to stay behind. So today's program is a difference between advice for poor people, middle-class people, and rich people. And once again, you notice I share books with Donald Trump, not the other guys. Okay? So we're talking right now about, China's wobbling, the stock market's crashing. I wrote the biggest crash of all was coming in 2016, and it's right on time, right on schedule. Same time, Putin is building air bases in Syria, and he wants us to back Assad, and Saudi Arabia wants to nuke Assad, and Japan's attacking China. And this is a kind of interesting time, but for nowhere man, it's also a terrified time, and they, it's called a deer in the headlights. They get paralyzed, and they don't know whose advice to follow. And like we said, if you're poor, Susie Orman's advice is perfect. Middle class, Dave Ramsey, Dave Bach, Tony Robbins, and Rick Edelman. Fantastic advice. But if you want to be rich, it really is about becoming an entrepreneur and crossing the line. And you got to make a decision. Which is that true? You got to make that decision.
Yep, it's a choice in the moment. You got to embrace that.
And Garrett, you said something really interesting just before the break. You said that you put your first investment group together based on behavior and philosophy. So you played the cash flow game, and those who had aligned behaviors or who were kind of aligned to you, you put this group together and you did your first investment. So whether it's investment, whether it's a business, because most people, they want to start a business and they choose the people that have the money, or they choose friends and family who they're comfortable with.
Right.
Instead of, and this has been our mistake is having partners who were not aligned philosophically to what we were doing.
Yeah,
so that's a huge distinction.
We had poor people. They're highly educated accountants and attorneys and all that, but they didn't know anything about being rich. They're terrified people. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, look at just as an example, my attorney, when he was 11 years old, he was sitting in meetings with Walt Disney planning his grandfather did Walt Disney's estate, or Earl Holding, or John Huntsman, all these billionaires that he's getting to. And then he became independently wealthy and chose to be an attorney. That's the guy I'm going to spend time with because he gets it. It's not just legalese. It's how do I protect you?
Yeah, and you talk about relationship capital.
Right. So really, if anyone thinks they have a money problem, that's only a symptom. The real reality is there's two more precious forms of capital. One is our mental capital, our ideas,
mindset,
our knowledge,
philosophy.
our mindset, philosophy. And the other is relationship capital. And when we combine those two and when we increase our knowledge, right, then we have more to offer. When we're spending time with the right people, we can get more done. So when someone says, oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know, that's not true. Because if I didn't know anything, I'm not sitting on the radio with you. I don't get to know you guys.
Well, that's where nowhere man comes.
Right.
I meet so many people who are nowhere people. I don't want them as part of my team. Remember when I was a little kid, you were playing softball? If you're the kid not being picked, you're nowhere man or nowhere woman. You see, and that's what's going on financially right now.
You got to bring something to the table.
Yeah, you got to know something.
Yeah.
So that's really kind of the message today's Rich Dad Radio show is if you're nowhere man and you don't know what to do, you better figure out who you are first.
Yeah, who you're going to listen to and who you're going to spend your time around.
Right.
Yeah.
So once again, you can submit your questions to Ask Robert at Rich Dad Radio. And this is the first question. Melissa, what's the first question?
Robert, our first question today comes from Quentin in Harrodsburg, Kentucky. Favorite book, Unfair Advantage. He says, Robert, you talk a lot about raising capital. I understand that there are several ways to do this via investors and banks. However, do you have a preference? Do you have any tips on raising capital without falling for a scam or other form of financial corruption?
Well, you got to study. The reason in 1973, the first course I had to take, my father wanted me to get my MBA. My poor dad, my rich dad said take a real estate course. Real estate is about debt and taxes. So once I understood what a good asset was, I went out and started raising capital. Unfortunately, most people raise capital because they need money, and they don't have a good investment. So people raising capital, I want to look at their track record, what they have. Most con men have nothing, and they can tell you a great story. Don't be that con man. When I started raising capital, I knew a good investment and a good asset from a bad one. Any comments, Kim?
Well, I think the biggest thing, this is a huge subject because raising capital, you're taking on a huge responsibility. I mean, if you're borrowing money from individuals, you got to know how you're going to pay them back, how they're going to get a return on the money. If you're borrowing money from a bank, you got to know how you're going to pay that money back. And a lot of people,
small.
Yeah, well, you start small, but a lot of people think, I'm just going to raise money and forget about the people you're raising money from. It's a huge responsibility, and you got to start there.
Once again, Garrett Gunderson is our guest today, and he's raised a lot of capital as a financial planner tube and all that. And that's a scam, isn't it? A lot of that financial planner stuff.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
but they're legal scams.
Yeah. And it's just, I love when it's, hey, you got to take high risk to get high return is kind of the message.
Bullshit.
But then they don't take any risk. They get paid whether you make money or not.
Right.
And that's part of the frustration. And all the incentive is around retirement planning. I think we got to retire the concept of retirement where people stop providing value, stop having any control of their life, because the traditional way to retire is set aside a nest egg, then live off the interest, and then you become a slave to, if taxes go up, that lowers what you get to spend. If interest rates go down, that lowers what you get to spend. And inflation is going to run rampant the way that we continue to run
the greatest fear for people is not dying poor. The greatest fear of people is living without money.
Living without money, right.
And when the money runs out, then they go, oh, my God. And let's say you're an old guy of 50 or 60, then you're hosed.
USA Today said it was the number one fear of Americans.
Yeah, running out of money. When you're still alive.
Exactly.
It's okay if you can you spend
die that last day.
Yeah, your last breath, you spend your last dollar. That's called planning. You know what I mean? But the odds are, and this is my prediction, that's why I wrote Rich Dad's Prophecy, and I have book Second Chance and my video, The Man That Could See the Future. Most people are going to run out of money. And they're going to be destitute at that point. There'll be bag men and bag ladies pushing shopping carts. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Walty in Adelaide, Australia.
Adelaide, I love Adelaide.
Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It says, how important is it to have a rich mindset and to build yourself up before even investing or starting to run a business?
That's a great question. And this is what our friend Dave Ramsey said. And he works with middle-class people, live debt-free. When you hear live debt-free, you're middle class. Because the rich, are you going to use debt to get rich? You understand that? And that is a very, very big difference. Also, the rich don't pay taxes. And what most people go, I don't want the IRS audit. Then you should be middle class. Or you should be poor. You see, it goes on inside your gut. If you're Chicken Little and you can't stand an IRS audit, you really should just live below your means and cut up your credit cards and live debt-free and cling to that job at McDonald's and you'll be happy. Right? It's in your guts, isn't it?
It is. It's your DNA.
Yeah, your DNA.
And Walty is saying, do I build up the mindset first and then take the action? It all goes together because once you got that, this is what I'm going to do, then you go take some action, then you make mistakes, then you learn, then the mindset gets strengthened, then your experience gets strengthened.
Listen
and
to this woman.
Growing.
She's saying it, man, if you quit when you start getting your butt pounded, you should just go back to live debt-free, you know?
It fundamentally sounds like he's asking, do I have to have, then do, then be,
Yes.
or
Be,
should I
do,
be,
have.
do, have? And it's be, do, have. You've got to have the wealthy mindset along the way. Otherwise,
And
you're
it
going to
keeps
get
growing and getting wealthier
Right.
and wealthier, and that mindset keeps changing every single day.
And what I'm saying to people is, you're afraid of losing money, you will. And the question is, are you going to stand up again and do it again? That's a wealthy mindset. The other wealthy mindset, rich mindset, is, am I going to use debt, other people's money? Can you do that? And then, can you take on the IRS? I don't want to pay taxes legally. If you don't have that inside your gut, you cannot handle it inside your gut, your mind, your spirit, and your emotions. That's where it starts. You know, it's in you, who you are, what you're being.
if you embrace it and take that, that's where the payoff comes. It may be difficult, it may be a struggle, but if you don't, it's going to be pretty tough.
It's hard.
It is hard. It's not easy. It's
Yeah.
not easy, but if you do it and keep doing it, it's worth it.
And that's why with this crash coming in 2016, you know, it might be best to live debt-free, you know, cut back to, instead of a 5-bedroom house, cut down to a 1-bedroom condo in the lower rent district and live like a cockroach. It'll be fine. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Chike in Dubai. Favorite book, Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. It says, Robert, I'd like to know, how does increasing debt enhance the rich investor? And secondly, how does a market crash increase the fortune of a rich investor?
Well, those are pretty good questions, but it really shows you haven't done much study. That's the thing. Look, debt is money. And most people say, well, I don't have money to invest. Well, there's a lot of debt to invest with. But if you're going to use debt, then you've got to get very, 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 very smart. And I'll say it again. I said it over and over and over. I started with a little 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo on the island of Maui. I used 100% debt. How'd you start, Kim?
I started with a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house in Portland, Oregon, was $45,000.
How'd you learn to use debt?
I was 19 years old in college. I bought a 3-bedroom townhome, rented it out to 2 other college roommates, and
That's how you
got
start.
a champ loan
You
for the
start
down
small.
payment.
You start small.
And that's why my friend
$100,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
that's my friend Dave Ramsey says it best. You know, it says most people are actually employees or self-employed. The investment strategy that the three of us in this room are using, we're entrepreneurs. You know, that's like Donald Trump is an entrepreneur. You know, Carly Fiorina is an employee. There's very different mindsets and being and spirits and all this stuff. So the whole theme of this program, are you poor, middle class, or rich? Because when this crash comes, you'd better make sure who you are. And we say, you know, the world is at your command. When this baby comes down, we're going to get richer, isn't it?
Absolutely.
This is going to be the best time of our lives, because I don't care if markets go up and down. Do you care?
I think no. And here's the thing that's disappointing is the news reports it as money's been lost. Money doesn't get lost. It
No.
gets transferred.
Transferred to the
It
rich.
gets transferred. So
And-
there's the evidence right there. Every
and
time you hear the word lost, it means someone else got richer.
And I think here's what the middle class does, and this goes back to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, your chapter on Mind Your Own Business. We look at our business, our investments,
As a business.
business. Their assets are as a business. Most middle class poor, they look at them as, if they even have them, as a hobby or something that has to be dealt with.
Job.
Automated savings.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want a job?
No.
You want a job?
No,
Kim?
thank you.
I don't want a job. And that's kind of the mindset. That's where it starts. So once again, I want to thank Garrett Gunderson. You know, fantastic book, Killing Sacred Cows, which is, you got to kill the myth inside your head, right? That's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And you can submit your questions to Rich Dad Radio to Ask Robert. And I want to thank you all for listening. I trust you've learned something today. It's not good advice or bad advice. It's what's best for you. If you're a poor person who cannot control your credit card, Susie Orman is it. You're going to be middle class. Dave Ramsey, David Bach, and Rick Ellman are perfect guys. They invest in mutual funds. I would never touch those things because they're guaranteed
I have
losers.
$0 in those.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Tony Robbins, is a good friend of ours, but he's promoting his son's, give the money to his son. Now, if you know that, then you can make your decision whether it's good or bad for you.